Tom Cruise, a Hollywood titan whose name conjures images of daring stunts and box office dominance, had long been a master of controlling his narrative. Known for his intense dedication to films like the Mission Impossible series, where he performed death-defying feats at 62, he was both revered and enigmatic. So when Jimmy Kimmel Live announced him as the guest to promote the latest Mission Impossible installment, the anticipation was palpable. Would Kimmel, with his biting humor and knack for poking at celebrity quirks, tread lightly with a star of Cruise's caliber? Could Cruise, whose polished charm rarely faltered, handle the host's inevitable provocations? The studio buzzed with excitement, the audience primed for a glimpse into the life of a man who seemed larger than life. Kimmel took the stage, his grin wide but carrying a sly edge, as he opened with a nod to Cruise's stunt-filled career. "We've got Tom Cruise tonight, folks," he said, pausing as the crowd roared. "But what's it like to keep risking it all at his age?" The laughter was immediate, tinged with curiosity. Why had Cruise agreed to this interview, knowing Kimmel's penchant for pushing buttons? Was he here to celebrate his latest triumph, or was there a vulnerability waiting to be exposed? The stage was set, the lights blazed, and Kimmel's monologue leaned into jabs about Cruise's relentless work ethic, each one hinting at a deeper probe to come. The audience leaned in, sensing a storm brewing. What would happen when Cruise took the stage? Could Kimmel challenge a legend without sparking a fire? Had Cruise come prepared to deflect, or was something rawer simmering beneath his megawatt smile? No one could have predicted the clash that would unfold, leaving the internet ablaze and Kimmel stunned. Hit that like button if you're Team Cruise, drop your thoughts in the comments, and stick around. This gets intense. The audience's cheers erupted as Tom Cruise bounded onto the stage, his energy electric, his trademark grin lighting up the studio. Dressed in a sharp black blazer, he moved with the agility of a man decades younger, his eyes sparkling with a mix of charisma and guarded intensity. Jimmy Kimmel rose to greet him, his handshake enthusiastic but his smile tinged with a playful mischief, as if already plotting his approach. The crowd's applause was thunderous, a testament to Cruise's enduring star power, but a subtle undercurrent of anticipation rippled through the room. Kimmel eased into the interview, starting with praise for the latest Mission Impossible film, lauding its jaw-dropping stunts and Cruise's fearless commitment at 62. Cruise responded with his usual warmth, his voice animated as he shared anecdotes about hanging from helicopters and training for underwater sequences, the audience hanging on his every word. The conversation flowed smoothly at first, with Kimmel tossing out questions about the film's grueling production and Cruise's passion for pushing physical limits. But the mood shifted when Kimmel veered toward a more personal angle, his tone turning teasing. He held up a photo from the film's set, showing Cruise mid-stunt, and made a quip about whether he was running from age as much as from explosions. The audience laughed, but Cruise's smile tightened, his fingers tapping briefly on the armrest. He deflected with a light comment about loving the challenge, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of irritation. Kimmel, undeterred, leaned in with another jab, suggesting Cruise's obsession with stunts might be a way to prove something. The crowd chuckled, but Cruise's gaze sharpened, his silence louder than the applause. The crew in the control booth exchanged glances, sensing the first sparks of tension. Had Kimmel's quip about age hit a nerve? Was Cruise's charm a mask, or was he biding his time? The stage felt charged, the stakes rising with each passing second, as the interview edged closer to a confrontation. The studio's atmosphere grew taut, as Jimmy Kimmel's teasing jabs about Tom Cruise's age and stunt obsession cast a shadow over the interview. The audience, still chuckling at the host's quip about Cruise proving something, began to sense the shift, their laughter fading into murmurs. Cruise sat with a composed exterior, his megawatt smile still in place, but his eyes carried a glint of steel, his hands now still, clasped tightly in his lap. Kimmel, emboldened by the crowd's earlier response, pressed further, his tone teetering between playful and provocative. He pulled out a montage of Cruz's stunts, from scaling the Burj Khalifa to clinging to a plane, and joked about whether Cruz was chasing immortality or just a midlife crisis. The crowd roared, some clapping eagerly, but Cruz's face hardened, his jaw tightening as he absorbed the barb. He responded with a measured comment, emphasizing his love for storytelling through action, but his voice carried a subtle edge, a warning Kimmel seemed to overlook. The host, leaning into his comedic rhythm, doubled down, asking if Cruz ever considered slowing down at 62, complete with a mock impression of a creaky run. The audience's laughter was mixed with gasps, the room's energy tilting toward unease. Cruz's posture grew rigid, his gaze locking onto Kimmel with an intensity that seemed to still the studio. He offered a brief, clipped response, deflecting the joke but making it clear the topic was unwelcome. The camera caught a close-up of his face, the warmth from earlier replaced by a controlled intensity. The crew in the control booth tensed, the monitors showing Kimmel's mischievous grin and Cruz's smoldering restraint. Had Kimmel's focus on age and stunts crossed into disrespect? Was Cruz's patience fraying, or was he calculating a response? The interview was no longer a casual exchange. It was a tightrope, and the audience could feel the balance slipping, each moment charged with the promise of escalation. The studio's atmosphere grew dense with unease as Jimmy Kimmel's persistent taunts about Tom Cruise's age and stunt-filled career steered the interview toward a dangerous precipice. His earlier mimicry of a feeble run had already struck a nerve, and the audience, their laughter now faint, shifted restlessly, sensing the host's reckless prodding. Cruz remained composed, his hands clenched on the armrests, his eyes radiating a quiet fury that seemed to contract the room's expanse. Kimmel, fueled by the crowd's earlier amusement, pressed forward with a boldness bordering on audacity. He displayed a fan-made cartoon depicting Cruz clinging to a cliff, its caption mocking his battle against time, and jested about whether these stunts were a desperate grasp at eternal youth. The audience responded with hesitant chuckles, some exchanging uneasy glances, their mood souring. Cruz's expression darkened, his jaw tightening, his silence a heavy counterpoint to the host's levity. He offered a brief defense, emphasizing his commitment to inspiring through his craft, but his tone carried a sharp undercurrent, a signal Kimmel failed to heed. Undeterred, the host ventured further, suggesting Cruz's next feat might involve outpacing the frailties of age. The crowd drew a collective breath, the remark sparking a wave of shock, and Cruz's frame grew taut, his silence more potent than any retort, rendering Kimmel's laughter brittle. The camera lingered on Cruz's face, capturing the smoldering intensity behind his polished exterior, a tempest poised to erupt. The crew in the control booth swapped anxious looks, the monitors alternating between Kimmel's waning confidence and Cruz's resolute glare. Had the host's relentless barbs breached a sacred boundary? Was Cruz's composure on the verge of fracturing, or was he orchestrating a calculated response? The stage had become a volatile arena, the audience acutely aware of the escalating stakes, each moment thrumming with the promise of a confrontation destined to stun. The weight of unspoken words hung heavy, every subtle gesture amplifying the brewing conflict. As the interview teetered on the brink of chaos, the studio simmered with a palpable strain, the weight of Tom Cruise's silent rebuke to Jimmy Kimmel's age-related taunts, casting a chill over the once lively set. The audience, their earlier amusement now a distant memory, sat riveted, their eyes darting between Cruise's steely resolve and Kimmel's faltering bravado. Cruise's frame remained rigid, his hands still clenched, his gaze a piercing force that seemed to unravel the host's composure. Kimmel, visibly unsettled yet clinging to his role, attempted to shift the conversation, pivoting toward Cruise's decades-long career and his knack for defying Hollywood norms. But the effort felt strained, the room still heavy with the sting of his earlier jabs about mortality and stunts. Cruz's responses were sparse, his demeanor cold, each gesture a calculated dismissal of the host's attempts to regain footing. Undeterred, or perhaps too far gone to retreat, Kimmel ventured into riskier territory, alluding to whispers about Cruz's personal beliefs, a nod to his long-standing association with Scientology, cloaked in a jest about seeking eternal vigor. The crowd drew a sharp breath, the reference igniting a ripple of unease, their murmurs growing louder. Cruz's expression tightened, his eyes narrowing to slits, the air around him crackling with suppressed rage. His silence grew heavier, a deliberate void that swallowed Kimmel's nervous chuckle, leaving the host exposed. The camera captured the escalating tension, lingering on Cruz's smoldering intensity and Kimmel's sweat-dampened brow. The contrast stark. The crew in the control booth braced themselves, their monitors flashing between the host's crumbling facade and the star's unyielding presence. The interview had shed its veneer of civility, morphing into a high-stakes duel where every glance carried weight. Had Kimmel's veiled jab at Cruz's beliefs crossed a final threshold? Was the star's restraint nearing its limit? Or was he poised for a strategic counterstrike? The stage pulsed with anticipation, the audience captivated by the brewing storm, each second taut with the promise of a reckoning that would reshape the night's narrative. The clash was no longer a mere talk show exchange. It was a collision of titans, teetering on the edge of an explosive resolution. The studio crackled with an electric unease. Tom Cruise's icy silence in response to Jimmy Kimmel's veiled jab about his Scientology ties, deepening the chasm between them. The audience, now hushed, leaned forward, their eyes locked on Cruise's unyielding presence and Kimmel's increasingly desperate attempts to steer the interview. The host, his face flushed with a mix of regret and defiance, tried to pivot, shifting focus to the global success of the mission. Impossible franchise. But the gesture felt like a flimsy shield. The room still charged with the lingering sting of his earlier provocations about age and personal beliefs. Cruz remained statue-like, his posture rigid, his gaze a relentless force that seemed to strip Kimmel bare. His responses when they came were minimal, each word delivered with a precision that underscored his disdain, offering no warmth to ease the mounting tension. Kimmel, sweat beading on his forehead, pressed forward with a forced levity, attempting to reclaim the crowd by jesting about Cruz's rumored plans for even grander stunts, perhaps in outer space. The crowd's reaction was muted, a few nervous laughs drowned by the weight of Cruz's demeanor, his eyes narrowing further, his silence a rebuke more powerful than any outburst. The host's grin waned, his hands fidgeting with a cue card, as he tried to lighten the mood with a comment about Cruz's relentless drive being almost otherworldly. The audience murmured, the attempt at humor falling flat, the room's energy tilting decisively toward Cruz's quiet dominance. The camera lingered on the stark contrast, capturing Cruz's smoldering resolve and Kimmel's fraying confidence, the monitors in the control booth flashing with the intensity of the moment. The crew braced for impact, sensing the interview, spiraling beyond salvage. Had Kimmel's reckless probing into Cruz's personal and professional life ignited an irreversible fire? Was Cruz's composure a prelude to a devastating retaliation, or had he already seized control? The stage was a crucible, the audience enthralled by the escalating drama, each moment heavy with the certainty of a confrontation that would leave an indelible mark. The clash had transcended mere banter, becoming a raw test of wills poised for a seismic shift. The studio was a cauldron of raw tension, Tom Cruise's unyielding silence in the face of Jimmy Kimmel's faltering attempts to salvage the interview casting a pall over the set. The audience, their earlier levity replaced by a captivated hush, sat riveted, their eyes darting between Cruise's commanding presence and Kimmel's unraveling poise. The host's ill-fated jest about Cruz's otherworldly drive had landed like a misfired arrow, deepening the rift. And Kimmel, his face, now slick with perspiration, scrambled to regain control. He pivoted to a safer topic, probing Cruz's thoughts on the future of cinema. But the effort was feeble, the room still heavy with the sting of his earlier barbs about age, stunts, and Scientology. Cruz's demeanor remained frigid, his responses sparse, each gesture a deliberate dismissal that left Kimmel's questions hanging unanswered. The host, desperation creeping into his movements, leaned forward with a forced grin, attempting to rekindle the crowd's energy by suggesting Cruz's relentless career pace might be a way to escape personal scrutiny. The audience gasped, the remark slicing through the studio's fragile calm, their murmurs swelling into a low roar. Cruz's expression darkened, his jaw clenching, his eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to consume the space between them. His silence grew heavier, a deliberate weapon that exposed Kimmel's vulnerability, the host's nervous chuckle fading into the void. The camera captured the escalating drama, lingering on Cruz's smoldering intensity, and Kimmel's crumbling facade, the monitors in the control booth flashing with the stark contrast of their dynamic. The crew stood frozen, sensing the interview's collapse into uncharted territory. Had Kimmel's latest jab, tying Cruz's work to personal evasion, crossed a final boundary? Was Cruz's restraint on the verge of shattering, or was he orchestrating a moment of calculated dominance? The stage pulsed with anticipation, the audience ensnared by the mounting conflict, each second thrumming with the inevitability of a reckoning. The clash had evolved into a high-stakes duel, no longer confined to the talk show format, but a raw confrontation poised to redefine the night's legacy. The studio was a crucible of searing tension. Tom Cruise's smoldering silence in response to Jimmy Kimmel's reckless suggestion that his career was an escape from personal scrutiny, igniting a firestorm of anticipation. The audience, now wholly captivated, sat in a hushed reverence, their eyes locked on Cruise's commanding presence and Kimmel's disintegrating composure. The host, his face a mask of desperation, tried to backpedal, his hands fumbling with a pen as he shifted to a question about Cruise's mentorship of younger actors. But the attempt was futile, the room still reverberating with the weight of his earlier provocations about age, Scientology, and now personal motives. Cruz remained an immovable force, his posture rigid, his gaze a relentless blade that seemed to carve through Kimmel's faltering defenses. His responses, when offered, were curt, each word a measured rebuke that deepened the host's unease. Kimmel, his voice tinged with panic, tried to reclaim the crowd with a weak jest about Cruz's intensity, being enough to intimidate any co-star. The audience's reaction was a collective wince, the quip landing like a spark in a powder keg, their murmurs swelling into a restless hum. Cruz's expression grew fiercer, his eyes narrowing to slits, his silence a thunderous condemnation that left Kimmel's nervous laughter exposed as feeble. The camera lingered on the stark contrast, capturing Cruz's righteous fury and Kimmel's sweat-soaked brow, the monitors in the control booth flashing with the raw intensity of the moment. The crew braced for collapse, their hands hovering over controls, sensing the interview's descent into chaos. The stage had become a battleground, each gesture and glance amplifying the stakes, the audience enthralled by the escalating drama. Had Kimmel's persistent jabs finally broken through Cruz's ironclad restraint? Was the star poised to deliver a devastating counterblow, or had he already seized the narrative? The clash was no longer a mere talk show exchange, but a raw test of wills, teetering on the edge of a seismic eruption. The room pulsed with the certainty of a confrontation that would etch itself into cultural memory, every second heavy with the promise of a resolution that would stun. The studio was an inferno of raw emotion, Tom Cruise's unyielding silence in the face of Jimmy Kimmel's crumbling attempts to salvage the interview, transforming the set into a stage of high drama. The audience, their breaths held, sat transfixed, their eyes darting between Cruz's towering presence and Kimmel's exposed vulnerability. The host's weak jest about Cruz's intensity had backfired spectacularly, deepening the chasm between them, and Kimmel, his face now a sheen of perspiration, grasped desperately for control. He tried to pivot, mumbling about the impact of Cruz's films on global audiences, but the words were hollow, drowned by the lingering sting of his earlier barbs about age, Scientology, and personal motives. Cruz remained an implacable force, his posture unyielding, his gaze a searing indictment that stripped Kimmel's comedic facade bare. His minimal responses carried a weight that silenced the room, each gesture a calculated dismissal that left the host floundering. Kimmel, his hands trembling, made a final ill-fated attempt to lighten the mood, suggesting Cruz's relentless drive might be fueled by something beyond mere passion. The audience gasped, the remark a reckless plunge into forbidden territory, their murmurs erupting into a low roar. Cruz's expression hardened, his jaw clenching, his eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to consume the studio's artificial warmth. He rose slowly from his chair, his movements deliberate, his presence commanding as he turned toward the stage's edge, his departure a silent but thunderous rebuke. The crowd drew a collective breath, a mix of shock and awe rippling through. The rouse, their eyes locked on Cruz's retreating silhouette. Kimmel sat frozen, his face ashen, his hands motionless, as the weight of his missteps crashed around him. The camera captured the moment's intensity, lingering on Cruz's resolute exit and Kimmel's stunned silence, the monitors in the control booth flashing with the wreckage of the interview. Had Cruz's walkout been a spontaneous act of defiance or a masterful assertion of his untouchable legacy? Was Kimmel's humiliation complete, or could he salvage the ruins? The stage was a testament to Cruz's dominance. The audience left reeling, sensing the dawn of a cultural firestorm. The studio lights dimmed as Tom Cruise's resolute exit left a stunned void, his silent departure a final devastating blow to Jimmy Kimmel's faltering reign over the interview. The audience, their collective gasp giving way to a surge of applause and murmurs, sat in awe, their eyes fixed on the empty stage where Cruz's commanding presence had just dominated. Kimmel remained seated, his face drained of color, his hands gripping the desk's edge as if to anchor himself against the wreckage. He attempted a weak smile, his voice barely audible as he muttered about the unpredictability of live television. But the gesture was futile, swallowed by the audience's reverence for Cruz's triumph. The band struck up a discordant tune, a desperate effort to fill the silence, but it clashed with the room's charged atmosphere. The crew in the control booth, scrambling to regain order, cut to commercial break, the monitors flashing with close-ups of Kimmel's ashen expression, and the crowd's divided reactions. As the show paused, clips of Cruz's walkout flooded the internet, sparking a cultural explosion. Social media erupted with hashtags and memes, Cruz's steely stride juxtaposed against Kimmel's stunned silence, each post amplifying the star's victory. News outlets seized the moment, their headlines blaring, "Tom Cruise storms off Kimmel in explosive feud," and "Kimmel reeling after Cruz's exit." Commentators lauded Cruz as a legend who'd reclaimed his narrative, his defiance a rebuke to a media culture that thrived on provocation. Kimmel's team rushed to edit the official footage, softening the edges, but unfiltered clips spread relentlessly, racking up millions of views. Cruz, ever enigmatic, never addressed the incident, moving on to his next project with unwavering focus, his silence cementing his untouchable aura. The moment transcended the talk show stage, becoming a cultural milestone, a testament to one man's ability to turn a host's missteps into a masterclass in dominance. Kimmel, humbled, faced a reckoning, his stage a cautionary tale of underestimating a titan. The audience, both in the studio and online, stood in reverence, their cheers echoing a victory that redefined the power of presence, leaving Cruz's legacy not just intact but exalted.